I've witnessed over the years companies change hands where it's been quite a cliff edge. We do a quarterly update where we are very transparent with the entire company about our financial performance. You've got to really get people thinking like a company owner. I think the key question with employee ownership is
welcome to One Amazing Experience, where we talk to events and hospitality leaders about the work that goes on behind the scenes to create unique and memorable guest experiences. I'm delighted today to be joined by George Foden, Managing Director of Wise Productions. Now, for 30 years, Wise Productions has been at the forefront of creative event production, bringing a blend of creativity and technical talent to turn ambitious briefs into unforgettable experiences. In 2022, they moved to an employee ownership model, and last year won Employee Ownership Transition of the Year award at the UK Employee Ownership Awards. So this is a fantastic subject to dive into, and I think we'll find out along the way why event leaders should at the very least look into why it might be a good fit for their company. So, George, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you doing?
Pleasure. Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. Nice quiet lull in August, so
yeah,
enjoying that.
Before things start to get busy. So congrats again on your win at the UK Employee Ownership Awards. I noted the judges' comments said you gave a textbook example of how to engage with your team as part of the transition process. They'll be encouraging others to follow suit. So I'm interested to find out a bit more about your process. But I think a good starting point would be to go through what the employee ownership model looks like at Wise and where the idea initially came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, yeah, employee ownership as a form of company ownership is, people think it's a relatively new thing in the United Kingdom, but it's been around for a while. People probably know companies like John Lewis that have obviously been in the market for many decades with their employee ownership model. Sort of more recently, in the last sort of 10, 15 years, there's been a model of ownership which we've adopted, which is called the Employee Ownership Trust. So when you look at companies like John Lewis, they're a partnership. They've got a partnership model that lots of companies use. With us, we have what's called an Employee Ownership Trust model, which effectively means that the majority ownership of the company is held by a trust. And a trust is just sort of a legal vehicle, really. And that trust is set up via a trust deed, which is a very sort of long legal document. But basically what it says in a nutshell is it says this company exists to give benefit to the employees at the time. So it's not a model of direct share ownership. So the employees at Wise Productions, they don't personally hold shares in the business. They're not sort of financially tied to that. They haven't had to put any of their own money in to hold those shares. It just means that if you work for Wise Productions and you meet sort of eligibility criteria, you can derive financial benefits from the profit of the business. And that is sort of legally set out in our trust deed. So yes, it is quite a unique form of ownership. In terms of why we've gone down this route. So our founder, David Wise, as you said in your introduction, the business was founded 30 years ago by David. He really wanted to look at ways to secure the legacy of what he had built over that time. And, in a landscape in our industry where there's often mergers, takeovers, purchases of companies, and sometimes that works out brilliantly. Other times, I think it's fair to say those companies can change quite radically. Maybe the sort of ethos and values that were built up by a founder starts to diminish when, especially when maybe taken over by a much larger company, which has sort of more established, more dominant values and business practices. We're a small, medium-sized business. And I think Dave was very keen to ensure that the legacy of the company was preserved. Ultimately, the jobs were protected going forward. The people who had contributed to the growth of the business and its success, that they had security for sort of their long-term ambitions. And so I think he sort of felt employee ownership was the best route to do that. I think it's also fair to say, people may be watching or listening to this who know David well. I think employee ownership is possibly the most David Wise thing that he could have done for the company. He's always been incredibly generous as sort of a founder and company owner. I think he's always valued hugely the contribution of the people who've helped develop the business. And I think he wanted to ensure that that was a priority going forward. Also, I think it gave him a transition to a new form of ownership that could be on his terms in terms of the time scales and how it was managed. And he's very much still part of the business. He's our chairman, and still is actively involved in sort of the running of the company in that role. He is taking a step back from the sort of direct day-to-day ownership that's very much sort of in my hands and in the board of directors' hands. But again, I've witnessed over the years companies change hands where it's been quite a cliff edge. The person who's headed up that company for decades, one minute they're there in the driving seat, and then they're gone. And that can have quite a negative impact on a company, on its clients, on its other external partnerships. Then thinking, well, hold on, where's this person gone? Who am I now dealing with? What's the future of the company? So I think it gives a more settled and controlled transition. And I think ultimately that was recognised by the judges with the award that you mentioned, in that we've really managed to plan that carefully to make sure there wasn't that sudden knee-jerk change.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing. I think that point about your team and acknowledging them, I think a lot of people underestimate the impact that even one individual in a department, especially if they're a supplier, if they're client facing, whatever it is, or even if they are behind the scenes and helping things run smoothly,
absolutely,
it can be absolutely monumental if somebody moves. So I think it's a great way to sort of protect that legacy, as you say. You mentioned the process.
Yeah.
We were obviously acknowledged by the judges for that. So what was the team's initial reaction? Were they overjoyed, confused? They were like, what is this thing? Or apprehensive?
Yeah, I think initially, because like I say, it's not a well-known model, employee ownership via a trust model. So, you can come out and say that and people just go, great, what's that? And, what does this mean? And I think what we wanted to make sure was that we first focused on the kind of education piece, right? What is this? What does it mean for you? What does this look like? What does it feel like? So initially we held an all-company residential, 2 days away. And that's where we put the meat on the bones of what this would mean for everybody. So we were very open about what the process would entail, and legally what it would mean, what it would look like. So what's a trust? How do you set it up? And then we thought, well, why don't we find somebody who's done this and get them to explain their stories? So via the Employee Ownership Association, which we're sort of very active members of, who run the EOA awards, we said, look, can you recommend a sort of founder or MD in an employee-owned business that perhaps is sort of a few years down the track? And they put us in touch with a chap called Neil, who is MD of a company called TensCare. And he came to speak and, sort of outline what they did, what it means for them, what it's resulted in, what's changed, what hasn't changed. And that was great because it gave the whole thing a bit of context. It was sort of, okay, well, this sounds good. And Neil gave a great presentation, and it wasn't all, sunshine and roses. He sort of said, look, there will be some challenges as well with this model. And this is what we've had to sort of grapple with over the past few years. But ultimately, we built a better, stronger business as a result. So I think those 2 days really helped cement in people's minds what this would mean. And bear in mind, we did this, so we transitioned to employee ownership in 2022 in December. So we did this in August. So this was several months before the kind of actual legal change of ownership occurred. We have heard stories of companies that have had to tell their staff nothing. And on the day the kind of deal was done, they were told, by the way, as of midday today, you're now employee owned, and that's sort of obviously quite a major thing. We felt, no, let's be much more open and transparent. Let's give good opportunity for questions, people to go away, do their own research. You can Google plenty of other employee owned companies. You can explore the EOA website. There's plenty of sort of resources on there about it. And we felt that was the best way to do it. We also got fantastic questions from our people on this, really, really interesting questions here. What's going to change? What's this going to mean? I think the key question with employee ownership is answering to people what it is and what it isn't. And, at the end of the day, the employee ownership trust is the owner of the company, but, it's still a commercial business. It's still run by, a board of directors. You will still have a line manager. You will still have a job description. You will still have to, undertake the duties of your role. That we will still have, standards and procedures and things. It's not a union. It's not somewhere where suddenly, every decision goes via 65 people. So it's quite important that that is explained. But equally, the trust is the majority owner. So ultimately, it has a part to play in the governance of the business. To get a little bit into the detail, I don't want to go too much on detail because it's not hugely exciting. But the way our trust is set up is there's a board of trustees. And the board of trustees acts on behalf of the staff. And the way ours is set up is we elect 2 members of staff to that board of trustees. There are 2 appointments from the board of directors, and then we have 1 external independent chair of the trustees. So, effectively, this body is scrutinizing the performance of the business. It's holding me to account as the managing director. And, and we've got 2 elected employees there who are there to represent the co-owners at large. And they're very much plugged into a number of networks of internal staff. So they bring views forward. They might take matters away and consult with staff and come back and say, hey, look, we've taken the temperature and really we think this is the kind of direction we should be going in on this. So there absolutely is that clear link between the strategic direction of the business and grassroots views from the staff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every decision we have to consult. Think, what things would you go to a company owner for sign off or direction on? It wouldn't be the brand of coffee in the staff room. It wouldn't be what color should we paint the vans. So you've got to really get people thinking like a company owner. What would you want to view on major strategic decisions? Maybe where the company's based, maybe what its overall strategy is going to be. What's its business plan? Is it going to take on a loan? Those kind of questions are the ones where the trust board has an absolutely crucial role in the governance of the business. And like I say, there's very strong staff representation on there via the staff trustees.
I think that's key because they are often on the ground. They know acutely what the market is doing.
Yep.
And so to be able to then therefore have, some kind of influence, like you say, not everything's going to be run through. Although I do know a few CEOs that would be quite partial to the type of coffee and would want to be involved in that decision. But yeah, it means they're able to sort of bring their knowledge and actually apply it and get them, I guess, thinking maybe more strategically, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. And often with a decision, there's shades of grey, isn't there? There's this outcome would commercially be the best thing to do. This outcome would perhaps not be commercially the best thing to do, but best for the people. And sometimes you're trying to find something in between. You're trying to balance the views of different stakeholders and different outcomes and come to a sort of unanimous viewpoint by using the governance system we've built up. And that's really, I think, what employee ownership is all about. It's not forgetting that ultimately the business is there to make money. And if it makes money, it distributes the profits to its shareholders. Now, in our case, the shareholders, majority shareholder is the trust, and the trust is bound, like I said, by its trustee to distribute profits to the staff. It's in the interests of the co-owners at large to think commercially and think about how we increase profitability and how we sort of grow the business in that sense. But we shouldn't forget also that life is not just about how much money you go home with every month. It's about your work environment. It's about the people you work with. It's about job satisfaction. It's about working for a company that shares your values and your ethos, sustainability and ESG and all of those things. So it means we get that really rich mixture of views, not just the P&L.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to earlier in my career and people I know and I speak to, and I'm imagining a sort of, let's say you're a junior event manager, or you often come in and you are operating in the system that's been set up before you came into the business, and it's later that you start making those sort of commercial decisions. So I would imagine even sort of at all levels of the company, it means that people are, like you say, thinking strategically, thinking more commercially, but retaining that key DNA that makes Wise, who you are. So you've started to walk me through the process. You had kickoff, which I think, if I'm going to, have one takeaway, I think that sort of that buy-in, getting that, everyone on the same page is absolutely crucial. And then I'm guessing a couple of months of lots of long emails and meetings with legal.
Yes, I mean, at the end of the
Stuff.
day, this is a company sale, so there's a lot of legal work involved. We have the support of a fantastic specialist solicitor called Robert Postlethwaite. Give him a little plug there. He's an employee ownership specialist solicitor. In fact, his practice is now employee owned as well, so he really has practiced what he preaches. So he really guided us through the steps of how to set it up. Because you've effectively got a company sale and you're establishing a trust at the same time. So there's a lot of work that has to go into that. So yes, there was a lot of sort of legal work that went on, lots of meetings, lots of emails, like you said, to sort of get that all prepared. Ultimately, also, we needed to make sure that the company finances would be sustainable going forward. So we had to sort of make sure that we were comfortable with sort of specific financials of the transaction and what that would look like going forward. And that was a very important part of the work David and I did to kind of satisfy ourselves that this was the right thing from a sort of financial perspective. There was also a big piece on kind of leadership transition. David was the founder, managing director, had been since the company was founded in the 90s. So I stepped up to managing director before the transition. So we sort of had a good kind of handover period, if you like. So I moved into that role in September, 3 months before the transition. And we also put together a brand new board of directors, all of which were internal promotions, which was fantastic. And again, we did that in advance of the transition to make sure that they were in post, up to speed. They were very much part of the discussions around the details of setting up the trust. We had to get our trustees elected. They had to be in place before then. So there was some work to do around that and some training and bringing them up to speed with it as well. Because at the end of the day, on that day when we transitioned, the trust had to be there to, be a signatory to all the documents and satisfy themselves that everything was in order and for the solicitor to walk them through all of that. So there was a lot of preparatory work. And of course, all this was going on in that traditionally really quiet time of year, which is the autumn to Christmas season. So, we were very much focused on client delivery and had this huge piece of work going on in parallel to sort of prepare the company for the transition to employee ownership. And then, yes, we all happened just before Christmas, so 15th of December 2022. So it's great. We were able to go to our staff Christmas party, everyone there, and announce at that moment, hey, you guys are now the majority owners of Wise Productions, and that was a really, really nice thing to do. So that was a very, very busy time in terms of leading up to that moment. And then what I would say is you then sort of, it's a huge sort of anticlimax because, a load of forms are signed and everyone goes to the pub and shakes hands and goes, brilliant. And then the hard work begins because, overnight, none of the realities of running the business and focusing on client delivery and strategy and what we're doing, none of that just suddenly evaporates. So, we were back in January and rolling our sleeves up and back to work.
Packing for another season. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, is there one thing that you wish you'd known at the start of the process that you know now? It maybe sounds like actually it was more after the move that things,
you do. The learning really does start after the transaction. I think probably wish I'd listened to more to people to say there is no rule book for employee ownership. You kind of think, well, you've got to follow someone else's model. What did that company do and how did they do it? And actually, I think what was recognised in our award entry is that everybody does it differently. There's no rule book. I mean, there are some HMRC and government rules around how these things have to be structured, and you've got to make sure you adhere to that. But in terms of the comms and how you do it internally, you need to do what's right for the business. And I think we've learned that more post the transition than pre. I think we were constantly pre going, oh, research other companies. What did they do? How many trustees did they have on their board? How did they structure this? How did they do that? You got to do what's right for every company is different. Its people are different, and you have to set it up for what's right for the business and where the business is in its growth journey. So I think maybe a bit more confidence that we were doing it the right way, which was our way, not maybe looking over our shoulder so much, think, oh, what did those guys do? Having said that, the opportunities to learn from other companies is huge. So we went to the Employee Ownership Association conference. We've been 2 years now, so we went before we transitioned and last year, which was afterwards. And that's just great because you've got people at all stages of the employee ownership journey. Some like us who were very much looking at it and preparing for it. Others who had done it very recently, and some who were 5, 6, 7 years down the track and were very happy to share their lessons. But at the end of the day, they share those lessons, and then at the end of it they would say, but you've got to do what's right for Wise, and what we did may not be.
Take the best bits and then
exactly
that's amazing. But I'm sure there have been many benefits to putting this in place. What would you say has been the main benefit of moving to this kind of setup?
Oh yeah, there have been plenty, and I'm sure many will continue to come. I think it's very easy to focus on the pure financial benefit of employee ownership. When you Google the concept, one of the first headlines you will see on every web page is, all staff can have £3,600 bonus a year tax-free. There's nothing tax-free in life anymore. Let's be clear about that. So that as a headline grabber, people think, oh wow, 3.5 grand tax-free a year, this sounds great. But I think the non-financial benefits can be hugely overlooked, and I think that's what we've really seen. The level of internal engagement in what we're doing has been huge. I think the benefits around being much more transparent around financial performance and getting people's input on strategies to look at areas of concern, that has been hugely beneficial. And and it's very easy in a business to think, well, the P&L should only be scrutinized in the boardroom. We do a quarterly update where we are very transparent with the entire company about our financial performance. We trust in them that we share very sensitive data around our financial performance, because we want their views, we want their input on that. And I get fantastic questions every quarter from all of our people on well, what does this mean, and how could we do better at this, and don't you think that perhaps that negative financial implication is because of X, Y, and Z? And you get a much richer range of views that only leads to better decision making. So I think whether you're employee owned or not, I would encourage greater transparency around the numbers and financial performance, and share that with your people. And I think owners, MDs, CEOs will be very surprised about perhaps what they get back in terms of improved engagement and performance.
Amazing. I think it's an interesting thing when you think about engagement, right? So I was reading, I think it's 112,000 hospitality vacancies unfilled at the last tally by UK Hospitality.
Yep.
It sounds like your experience, at least, would suggest that a model like employee ownership, or at least, as you say, greater transparency, is one way to get your teams more involved and therefore help fill those vacancies. Would you attest to that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're using our employee ownership model as a competitive advantage when it comes to recruitment. I think people are looking, especially when people are making major career moves, they're thinking, well, what kind of company do I want to work for? And I want to come to work with purpose and feel like I'm sharing in the benefits, and I'm my contribution is being rewarded. And again, that's not just financially rewarded, but non-financially, in terms of having influence and having a voice and feeling like you're helping steer the direction of the business and you're being listened to. So I think we're definitely leveraging our employee ownership model in that regard. But yeah, at the end of the day, our industry, it's hard work, it's long hours. What we do is very challenging, especially, our niche is the unique venues of London sector where, suppliers like us, caterers, florists, production companies, entertainment agencies, the venues themselves, they all perform miracles every night by transforming these spaces in 45 minutes into sort of luxury hospitality venues. And that has an impact on people's well-being. And I think, an employee ownership model helps mitigate that. It helps people feel like, again, that, their role has more purpose and they're having more impact on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately leads to greater job satisfaction. So, I would hope that we're an example of, if you adopt some of these models, whether you go for full employee ownership or simply, take some of the best bits of it and apply it to your business, that, you're going to see greater staff satisfaction, greater staff retention, and ultimately build a culture within the business that really, at the end of the day, is going to benefit your clients, right? Because I always say, yes, we're a production company. Behind me is a huge warehouse full of equipment, flight cases, all the rest of it. But it's the people, right? Every production company has boxes of lights and speakers and things. So what's the differentiator? The differentiator is the people. And I think, if you can leverage a model like this to really get greater traction from that, then ultimately the people who are going to see it are your clients, and that's only going to benefit the business in terms of its growth and its profitability. So it is a circle, and I think that then drives greater staff satisfaction and high performance, and the whole thing goes round and round. So I would hope that things like this could be a solution to some of the sort of talent shortages we're seeing in the sector, because, like I say, it's a tough business, and so we want people to feel motivated and rewarded.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's also rewarding as well. That's the thing. I had on my notes, can't make great events without great people. So I think we're in alignment there.
Absolutely, yeah.
On that topic, when you're looking to build, a team for events, in whatever role, are there certain characteristics or attributes that you think you're inherently looking for, or does it sort of depend based on the role?
So I'm going to throw all the acronyms out now. So as well as EOT, Employee Ownership Trust, we have been implementing over about the last 9 months a concept called EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a sort of model for running a business that is designed to sort of strengthen the key components of running a business. Again, I won't go into detail about it now. People can Google it, and there's lots online about EOS. But as a result of that, what we've moved towards is a much greater focus on recruiting on values. And of course, there's capabilities. Can someone do the job? Do they have the qualifications, the skills? But really, the starting point needs to be, are they aligned with the values of the business? And we've done a huge amount of work on this. And like any business, we've made some wrong hires. And when we look back at that, we've generally gone, it wasn't about their skills on paper or their qualifications or their experience. It was a misalignment of values. And I think that's what we now look for first. We look for values of enthusiasm and dependability and client first. And we want people to recognize the excellence that we need to put forward as a business. And our recruitment process is now much more designed to tease those out first and foremost. So that's quite a sort of important aspect of what we do in terms of recruitment.
Absolutely. Another part of that is when you found those people. We've mentioned it's coming into that preparatory time of year where people are getting ready for Christmas. Long hours, moving all around different locations. How do you and your team approach that in terms of looking after the well-being of your teams, your managers, but also, I guess, yourself as well? How do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really key factor, and I think our business is incredibly seasonal, as many people's is. So I think that's the first key consideration: is you've got those peaks and troughs. So, what we've noticed in recent years, especially post-COVID, the peaks are getting bigger and the troughs are getting deeper, right? So that kind of lurch from ludicrously busy to downtime is getting bigger and bigger. So I think it's about, how do you resource a business to cope with those peaks without burnout? But of
Yeah.
course, you don't want to be so over-resourced that during the troughs you're losing loads of money because you're overstaffed and you've got too many people. So that's a real tricky balance for us. So what we look at is, well, how do we ensure that during those busy seasons people are taking the time to look after themselves? So first and foremost, this, relatively unusual for a business like ours. We have quite a generous overtime scheme, and that can also be used for time off in lieu. And we monitor people's overtime quite closely, and we ensure that when certain thresholds are being reached, that rather than just chasing more overtime, they're actually taking time off in lieu instead. And that's being done, it's not being done 3 months later, it's being done relatively quickly. And that's very, very important, is sort of monitoring that. But at the end of the day, we don't expect people to put in silly hours without being appropriately remunerated for that. And I'm quite passionate about that. And I know that's quite a hot topic in the sector, and people have very different views on it, and that's absolutely fine. But we've chosen to do that, and we think it's the right model for us.
And it speaks to what we're saying, about choosing stuff and having that sort of the board of directors and the trust in place that are going to make the decisions that are right for you and right for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so I think that's sort of first and foremost, is monitoring the hours that people are putting in. I think also another thing we're really trying to do is be aware that it's not just about the hours. It's also about what is it that people are working on. And a particularly challenging event with, particularly, like I said earlier, in the unique venues London sector, we're all performing miracles every night. That generates a great deal of anxiety. I mean, we're dealing with such fine margins in our world in terms of time and things working properly and stuff turning up on time. On a lot of events, the stars have all got to align perfectly to deliver what the client wants in a really tight time scale, in a really, challenging, unique venue. And that puts a lot of burden on people mentally. They're thinking about that event for weeks in advance, and they're thinking about all the things that could go wrong, that could jeopardize the perfect delivery, and that has an impact beyond just the hours that people are spending on something. And I think we're getting acutely aware of that, and we're providing much the greater support mechanisms for people internally, so they can talk about their anxieties around particular things. How can we mitigate that? How can we provide reassurance? How can we simply just provide support, just extra people on site, extra pair of eyes and ears to help things go smoothly? I think it's very easy in certain roles to think the entire weight of the event rests on one person's shoulders. But, we want people to feel like there's a wider team they can lean on, and we can parachute extra people in support on a particularly tricky project. And that's looking at as well. So, it is challenging, and we are always wanting to do more. We now have really good mechanisms to listen to our people and understand what it is about our sector that perhaps makes the work challenging and stressful, and what we can do to alleviate that. At the end of the day, the world we're in is inherently, I mean, there's plenty of articles around, aren't there, that you read. So what's the 10 most stressful jobs? An event planner is somewhere, it's just well known. But that doesn't mean we have to sort of think that that's just the way it has to be. And we don't want a reaction in our sector of, well, you chose to work in events, so what did you expect? We need to find ways of making things better, and often that is around the support networks you put around people and how you ramp up that support at the busier time.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the sort of peaks and troughs are getting bigger. I was going to ask actually about sort of the trends you're seeing across the market. Are there any other sort of trends to do with client, consumer, customer behavior in terms of what you're seeing for Christmas bookings?
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting thing I've noticed recently in talking to a few clients is the model around what a Christmas or any staff celebration event looks like is changing. Inclusivity is now at the heart of what companies, especially the larger corporates, are looking to do. And that means the whole format of the event is being remodeled. So, if you've got a large Christmas party, the days of just, well, let's just have a big room with a DJ and loads of booze and have a massive rave, and that's going to suit a company of 1,000. Those days are gone. What people are looking at now is, right, we've got a diverse workforce, and they've all got different preferences in terms of what to do. How do we build events now where, yeah, of course, there's a room where there's a DJ on, but you'll also find there's quieter rooms. There's areas where people can just sit and play games, or just be in a quieter space and talk, or even areas where you can get away from the event completely. And that is now what seems to be coming to the forefront of what corporates are doing in terms of their Christmas parties. They need an event that suits the diverse nature of their workforce, and because otherwise, you'll find a segment of your workforce just doesn't want to come because the event hasn't been designed with their needs in mind. So I think that's quite interesting, is how you look at format and everything, the entertainment, the food, the volume, the furnishings, the size of the spaces. How is all of that designed around a very diverse workforce who have different preferences? So I think we'll start to see more of that.
Lots of complex decisions and choices to be made there. One thing I'm sort of trying to take the pulse of the industry when I'm speaking to people for these interviews. One of the big trends that's been interesting this year in terms of the work and how these events are put together is the use of AI. The sense I get is that we're still very much in the early stages. People don't quite know. They think, oh, I should be using it. And often there's that sort of shiny toy syndrome where people think they should jump on. Have you seen the impact of AI? Are you starting to test certain things in workflows, or?
Yeah, we have. We are starting to implement AI into a number of our systems and processes. Again, sort of our work with EOS and improving some of our business components means that automations and AI is absolutely an area that we're looking at, and we've introduced AI into a number of things. I mean, a lot of them are very quick wins, simple wins. I mean, a prime example is after every event, our teams at the event, they write a report and they go through the event, what went well, what didn't work well, what could we improve for next time. And often there's a lot of detail in there. And we just use very simple AI sentiment analysis just to give us some data points on which events do we need to zero in on. And that's just a really quick way of getting some data from a lot of information quickly. So some of them are very, very simple. Some of them are more complex. I know definitely our creative team are looking at AI tools in a lot of detail. Of course, what clients invariably want to see in our world is, what's my event going to look like? And they want to see three-dimensional renders, they want to see designs, floor plans, etc. And that's quite a manual process, and can be quite time-consuming. Some of the tools that are coming through now with AI in the creative space are going to speed that up dramatically. Obviously, it clearly still needs the creative human input to say what it is we're looking to get. But a lot of that legwork in terms of doing the 3D design and producing those renders, the AI tools that are coming through are going to significantly streamline that. And clients are going to start to see a real sort of bottom line benefit of that, because we're going to be able to turn around those requests more quickly and with less hours designers to produce the same results. So yes, we are actively looking at that. At the end of the day, our sector there, you still need a lot of human beings to go down there, unload the truck, push the flight cases in the venue and do the lights. So the robots haven't quite completely taken over, but yeah, we are certainly looking at a lot of things.
We're a little way off robot porters. Maybe
I think we are. I think we are. And I think what's really interesting as well is, much bigger picture. And I think what's good news for our sector in general is people are sort of saying, well, as a lot of these tools and technology changes the way we work and what we do, is the craving for human experience will only grow. And I think certainly the sort of live entertainment sector is seeing that and will only continue. So I think the good news, when people are thinking of careers and what's an AI-proof sector to go into, I really hope that live events will continue to be a growing sector, despite the rise of AI and technology in other sectors that might be seen as a threat. I think for us, it will only, bolster the sector as a whole.
Absolutely. No, I'm in total agreement there. Total agreement. We're coming up to time now. So we always like to ask every guest this same question. So I'd like to ask, what is your one amazing experience? Now, this could be an event that you've produced and worked on that you're very proud of, or it could be a time where you as a guest have experienced fantastic hospitality, or it could be that sort of bucket list, an event you'd love to put on, or just something that you would love to experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Sadly, in our world, discretion is our number one attribute. So some of the greatest things we've done, we cannot talk about, which is a shame. But I will have the memories of them in my head, but sadly can't be shared here. So I'm going to think about a recent event I worked on that was absolutely fantastic. And I can talk about. So we produce the US Ambassador's 4th of July party in London, which is at the Ambassador's residence in Winfield House in Regent's Park. And it's always a fantastic event, 4,500 people. It's the largest back garden in London after Buckingham Palace, so you can fit 4,500 people in there. And it's always a great event. And somehow the sun always shines, which is unusual for June, late June in the United Kingdom, but we always luck out. And this year they were fortunate enough to secure Take That to do the headline performance. And there was a moment when I was stood at our front of house control position, Take That in their final song of Never Forget. And we had brought in a significant quantity of confetti cannons. And the entire back garden of Winfield House during the finale of Never Forget by Take That, and the confetti cannons went off, and 4,500 people went absolutely berserk. And it's those kind of moments that you really have to sort of cherish in this business, because in terms of an experience to share in, that was really up there as one of the best. So, yeah, if there's one thing to take away from this, people, more confetti at your events. It's biodegradable, it's all good, but it doesn't half get a crowd going.
Amazing. And that's why you do it. That's why you do it, those moments. George, thank you so much for taking the time. As I say, it's a busy time of year where you're preparing to deliver even more incredible events. So where can people find you if they want to find out more?
Yep. So we just launched our refreshed website literally in the last few days. So please do go and check it out. There's lots on there, loads of imagery and things about what we've done recently. And there's information about our employee ownership model. So that's at wiseproductions.co.uk, and we're on Instagram at Wise Productions. And you'll see lots of imagery there of what we're up to and lots of stories about our EO journey as well. So, and if anyone ever wants to reach out to me to talk about employee ownership, if they're considering it, they just want to know more about it, we really benefited from the wisdom that was given to us by the EO community. And, we feel quite a responsibility to pass that on. So, always here to have a coffee with anyone who wants to talk about it more.
Fantastic. George, thank you so much for sharing your one amazing experience. Cheers.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.